I'm going to touch a little bit on vulnerability scanning for this video. Vulnerability scanning is a big aspect of cybersecurity defense. You need to know what your vulnerabilities are on your network and you need to address them. This is an ongoing process. Just because you don't have any vulnerabilities today doesn't mean that you won't the next day, because things are always changing, updates are always coming out, new attacks, 0 days, those sorts of things are always evolving. Now, most organizations will have some sort of vulnerability management program, and part of that vulnerability management program is to do a vulnerability scan. Don't confuse this with a pen test. Pen test is where a red teamer or a hacker comes in and they actively try to hack the network and see what they can do and where they can go and information they can collect and those sorts of things. A vulnerability scan simply just scans a host or a network to see what vulnerabilities are on the machine or on the network, typically based on signatures. So vulnerability scans, sometimes those get sold as like a pen test, but they're not the same thing. A vulnerability scan is something that any network can do for free for the most part. Unless you have a very large network, then you're probably looking at some sort of enterprise tool. So a vulnerability scan is meant to reduce your attack surface. That's really ultimately what we're trying to do, is lower those vulnerabilities so that attackers have less avenues into the network. And if they get into the network, they can cause less destruction then. While vulnerability scanning is relatively easy, there can be some challenges. Sometimes the volume of scan data can be very large. When I worked in the field, we were in charge of 20,000 assets, and you can imagine trying to scan 20,000 assets is going to take some time. And so you can't just, scan it with one scanner. It's going to overwhelm that scanner. It's going to take forever. We had to set up multiple scanners. We had to do it on a schedule, those sorts of things. Also, many of the machines that we were trying to scan were old and had limited network connectivity, and we didn't want to tip over those devices, as it's called, because if you send too much traffic towards it or you overwhelm it with processing, it can potentially crash the system. So there are some things you need to be aware of before you just, kind of dive into this. Sometimes certain industries are required to do scanning. So, for example, I do a lot of work with organizations that use credit cards for payment, or accept credit cards, I should say, for payment, and they are required to do some scanning. They must scan the perimeter of their network on, I believe it's an annual basis or semi-annual basis. Depending on the volume of credit cards that you take, sometimes it can also be on a quarterly basis. So they're required to do this. I'm skipping ahead here to scanning decisions number 8 of 9. So how should you scan your network? There's a wide variety of ways in which you can scan your network. So once you know that you need to scan your network and which parts of your network need to be scanned and how you're going to do that, you come up with the schedule, you come up with the plan. We need to determine if it's an internal vulnerability scan, so like you're inside of the network, which should discover many more things than being outside of the network. Because if you're outside of the network, external to the network, hopefully you have a firewall in place. Hopefully you have other tools that are blocking things on the perimeter. But if you're inside the network, then you probably don't have the power of a firewall. You probably just have host-based firewalls and potentially anti-malware software that could catch these types of scans. But typically you're a little bit more limited when you're on the exterior of the network. So keep that in mind. Also, when you scan, there are typically a couple different ways to do it. I'm just going to skip ahead here a little bit again, and I'm on 4 of 7. And the couple different ways to do it that I want to focus on is either credentialed scan, a non-credentialed scan, and then using an agent or non-agent. So a credentialed scan means that you give the vulnerability scanner credentials to the system. That way the system can be logged in, the system can be active, it can be running. And if someone has access to the system, a good username and password to get into the system, again, it's able to find much more vulnerabilities that could potentially be present. And in my opinion, that is the type of scan that you want to do, because you want to see all of the different types of vulnerabilities that your machine has, not just the ones that can be exploited if no one's logged in. Because ultimately, an attacker or a pen tester is probably going to get credentials to a machine and they're probably going to get logged in. Whereas a non-credentialed scan would just be like, imagine a Windows system that's sitting at the login screen. And you just send network traffic against it looking for vulnerabilities. You might find some things, but you're not going to find as many things as you would if the system was logged in. And so when I was out in the field, that was one of the debates we had is whether or not we should have credentialed scans or non-credentialed scans. And then if we were going to do a credentialed scan, what type of credentials should we give it? Should it be a standard user? Should it be an administrative user? Where are we going to store those credentials? Are we going to have those same credentials for every machine? So it can be a little bit of a process if you want to do a credentialed scan. The next thing is to define whether you're going to use a software agent or a non-software agent. Typically, most enterprise, I guess that I'm familiar with, most enterprise scanners will use a software agent. It's a little piece of software, it's installed on the machine, and that little piece of software helps the scanning engines determine the vulnerabilities. Again, this just yields typically better results. If it has no agent, typically we're just using a cloud-based scanner or a server-based scanner, and we're sending network traffic again at the machine to determine which vulnerabilities it has. So the software agent typically is able to collect that data a little bit easier. Executing the scan, typically you need to come up with a schedule. You don't want to, again, flood your network with scanning traffic. So these are all considerations that you want to take into account. Now, there are a wide variety of vulnerability assessment tools out there. Some that are the most common are Nessus, and I'm going to challenge you guys in the lab to download and install that on your own and run a scan using Nessus. There is an open source one called OpenVAS, and I'm going to show you that here in just a second. There's Nexpos, which is from Rapid7, I believe, and Qualys. Something that's a little bit more simplistic would be like Angry IP Scanner, also using something like Nmap just to scan the network and see what's out there. Maltego is another one. When I was out in industry, we used Insight VM from Rapid7, and it was very good. What I'm going to pivot over to next is one of the labs. This is Lab 5, Vulnerability Scanning. I would encourage you guys to take a look at it if you get a chance. Again, in the lab, I'm going to have you install Nessus, but this is an open source one. Anybody can download and install it and set it up. This is running on a Nessus server. And I don't want to get into all the specifics on how it looks and how it works, but I just want to go through a couple of screens here with you guys. So on the dashboard kind of gives me an overall view of all of the different scans that I've done, the vulnerabilities that it's found. It can track how many vulnerabilities I have had from week to week or month to month, and I can change this dashboard however I want. What I'm most concerned about here is the scans. So I've done 2 scans. There's a scan of Metasploitable, and if you're not familiar with Metasploitable, it is a purposely vulnerable machine. So you can see the severity here is 10. And so if I click on that host, I can see that, so I'm going to go over to the report actually. And the report tells me some information. It tells me that I have found 56 different vulnerabilities ranging from a severity of 10, which is as high as it gets, all the way down to a 2.6. And some of these things we don't need to be too concerned about, like it might figure out what the host name is, which typically probably isn't a huge deal and easy to find out, all the way up to something like a 10, which means that the operating system is end of life. It has execution vulnerabilities, it has backdoors, it has remote code execution. All of these things typically don't require a whole lot of sophistication. They typically don't require credentials. They're, for lack of better explanation, easy targets. They're easy things to pull off an attack against this machine. I can see ports that it has open. It has all these ports that are open, port 80, port 512, and you can go down the list. It found all of these applications that are running on the machine. It's running a SQL server in Samba, an Apache HTTP web server. Here's the particular operating system. It's Ubuntu 8.04. Ubuntu is like on version 25 or something like that. Most of the vulnerabilities that it finds has some sort of CVE code tied to it. A CVE we'll learn about in a different chapter, but the CVE here, this one's from 1999. And so I could click on that particular CVE and I could get some more information about it. And I could look this up on the internet and I could see probably even which tool or how to pull off the attack against that particular vulnerability. And so now, once we have this report, as a cyber defense team, we'd want to go remediate this machine. Well, how do we remediate it? Well, number one, we'd probably want to look at upgrading the operating system. And sometimes you can't. So if you can't upgrade the operating system, maybe you can implement a firewall, maybe you can turn off some of these ports, maybe you can update the applications that are running on it, maybe you can remove the applications if they're not being used. So there are some different things you can put into a defense side of things to make this machine a little bit more secure. Now, some vulnerabilities we might just have to live with. We need the machine out there for whatever reason. We've updated it as much as we can, and we just have to sort of accept that risk. And sometimes you need to make that decision as an organization. But I also did a scan against the Ubuntu machine itself. And so I came out to configuration and I set up a target. The target I set up is the Ubuntu server. Then I went to scans and I created a new task. And the task is to do the scan. And so what I did is hit play. And then it ran for a scan. It ran about for 10 minutes or so. I made it a non-credentialed scan, so I didn't give it any credentials. So this is just sort of sending traffic against this machine on the outside. And it found a variety of things. So if I go to the reports and I go to the Ubuntu scan, it looks like it found 5 things. It found one is rated a 10, that's out of life again, or end of life. It's running an Apache server. It's using HTTP instead of HTTPS. It has SSL certificates that are expired. I can see that it has ports 80 and 443 open. So if I'm an attacker now and I want to craft some malware, I'm probably going to have it utilize port 80 and 443 because I know that those ports are open. I can see applications that it's running. It's running OpenSSH, OpenSSL, and Apache Server 2.4.41. And so as an attacker, I could do a search. I'm not sure if that has internet access. I'm going to do Apache 2.4.41 vulnerabilities. We'll let AI do its thing here. And that particular version of Apache has several CVEs that this machine would be vulnerable to. So it looks like it can be manipulated. It looks like some uninitialized memory can be used to proxy a malicious FTP server. There's a wide variety of things going on here that just makes this machine not secure. So again, as a cyber defense team, it would be our task to now remediate this. It would be our task to go out and update the machine as much as we can to put in defenses, block ports, turn on the firewall, do all the different things that we can on the machine to make it a little bit more secure. Now, I wanted to show you guys an email I got here. This was just this year, a few weeks ago, as of the recording of this video. Microsoft Defender. So for some of the organizations that I do IT for, I use Microsoft Defender, and as part of Microsoft Defender for Endpoints, one of their higher level subscription options, what it does is it does some vulnerability scanning of the machine. So it's more of a agent-based vulnerability scanning. And so what this does is instead of a dashboard, and I do have a dashboard I can go out to, but what I like it to do is just email me, if it finds something that's significant. And so I can set those parameters. of, what does the score and severity have to be. I think I have it set to medium high or something like that and higher. But it emailed me this and it told me that, hey, it discovered a vulnerability on some machines, on 2 machines. The CVE is 2025-6558. And I could go and I could look this one up, but it has to do with Google Chrome. It's a high severity and it's rated an 8.8 out of 10. And we'll get to the CVSS in a different video, and I'll show you how that's calculated. But essentially what this is telling me is, hey, I got some machines that are vulnerable. It's not very high, but high, I should say. And I should think about remediating this. And so I could click on View Recommendations. It's going to have me log in and do a bunch of stuff, so I'm not going to do that right now. But I could view those recommendations, and ultimately it's probably going to tell me that I need to update Google Chrome. Just from my experience and being in the field, Google Chrome is awful in terms of vulnerabilities and constantly being patched. At the organization I worked for, we actually, at the time I was leaving, they were implementing a policy where we were going to get rid of Google Chrome and having to go to Microsoft Edge. Microsoft Edge is tended to be a little bit more secure, use a little bit more mature code lifecycle, and so it was not susceptible typically to some of these newer attacks and vulnerabilities where Chrome was. So if you have Chrome on your machines in your environments, just be aware that there's probably a lot of vulnerabilities with those machines. So as I mentioned, in the lab, I'm going to have you guys install a tool called Nessus. Nessus is typically a paid vulnerability scanning, but we can get a free trial as students. I'm going to have you install it on your machines. If you can't install it for whatever reason, let me know ASAP, and I'll find you a machine or I'll find you a workaround. You'll run the vulnerability scanner on your network. You'll discover the machines on your network, and then you'll see if any of your machines on your network, I'm talking your home network, are vulnerable to anything. And then I'm going to ask, what would you do if they are vulnerable? So hopefully that gives you a little insight into vulnerability scanning, what it's used for, some of the different tools out there, and what you would do if you found some vulnerabilities on your machine. That's all for the video. Thanks for watching.